Growing Turkish economic presence in the Balkans has raised fears of Ankara's nostalgic neo-Ottoman ambitions in the region. The Balkan Muslims, on the other hand, can barely benefit from Turkish investments, as they are almost exclusively reserved for Orthodox Christian dominated countries. I'm your host Kasim, and thanks for joining me for another KJ vid. In this video we will discuss Turkey's interests in the Balkans. Just before we begin, please kindly visit our website kjvids.co.uk and subscribe to one of our plans, which will give you the full transcripts of these reports and more geopolitical analysis. Alternatively, check out our YouTube membership plan, where you can find perks for our content. Turkey considers the Balkans as part of its natural sphere of influence, as the former power with the Ottoman Empire famously stopping only at the gates of Vienna at its peak. However, the region is presently predominantly under the United States and the European Union's sphere of influence, and Turkey's presence in the Balkans is rather limited. One of the main Turkish goals in the region is to strengthen its economic positions. According to the data of the Serbian Business Registers Agency, 851 companies, including 20 plants whose majority owners are firms and natural persons from Turkey, are registered in Serbia. It is interesting that none of the plants are located in southwestern Serbia, which is inhabited by the Muslim population. That is why many Serbian and Bosnian Muslims, as well as Albanians, criticize Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan for bringing factories to Serbs, while Bosniaks and Albanians get merely renovated mosques and the Ottoman-era buildings. Even though such a Turkish policy might seem controversial, it has deep roots in history. Balkan Christians in the Ottoman Empire were mainly peasants who worked for their Turkish landlords. Nowadays, however, the region has been economically devastated, and all ethnic and religious groups are looking at foreign investments as an opportunity to improve their standards of living. Foreign corporations, including the Turkish, see the Balkans mainly as cheap labour, as well as a gateway and commercial platform to Western Europe. Official statistics show a remarkable increase in Turkey's trade with the Balkans, from $435 million in 2002 to $3 billion in 2016. However, despite the increase, the Balkans make up only a fraction of Turkey's trade, as its business volume with the EU, for instance, is around $159 billion. The EU is still the biggest foreign trade partner of the Balkan countries, with an average share of around 75%. However, the investments of other players should not be neglected. Russia has focused on the energy sector, and the most significant sectors for Chinese investments are highways and railways. Naturally, Turkey also has high hopes for expanding economic relations with the region. Ankara continued its policy of free trade agreements and visa-free travel with countries in its neighbourhood, including those in the Balkans. By 2018, Turkey had finalised free trade agreements with the Balkan EU candidate states Serbia, Montenegro, Bosnia and Herzegovina, North Macedonia and Albania. Since all these countries have been heavily deindustrialised in the past decades, such agreements benefit the Turkish economy rather than the Balkan states. Turkey's economic presence in the Balkans is generally not what worries the European Union. Some EU officials fear that Turkey may gain political influence at the expense of Brussels. However, with the exception of Muslim populations in Bosnia and a few other places, such influence is very limited. One of the main problems for Turkey is the fact that most Balkan countries view the centuries of Ottoman rule in fairly negative terms. In spite of that, countries like Serbia and North Macedonia managed to improve their relations with Ankara, although they are still personalised rather than institutionalised. But that can change in the near future. Serbia, a country at the heart of the Balkans, is the main direction of the Turkish nationals living in Western Europe that are using the land route on their travel to Turkey. Belgrade and Ankara recently signed an agreement on joint Serbian-Turkish police patrols in Serbian cities. Officials say the measures will help a growing number of Turkish tourists feel safe when they visit Serbia. Serbian tourists in Turkey, however, won't have such a privilege to be guarded by Serbian police. In spite of this agreement, which directly undermines remnants of the Serbian sovereignty, Turkish influence in the region is still very limited. Unlike the Western powers, Ankara does not get involved in domestic politics in the Balkans. Turkey tends to support whoever ends up in power, and it does not take sides in the elections. Also, with the exception of Albania and Bosnia, the Muslim minorities that Turkey has an interest in are too small to fundamentally reshape politics. In his book Strategic Depth, former Turkish Prime Minister and diplomat Ahmet Davutoglu argued that Ankara should base its Balkans policy on Bosniaks and Albanians, the two significant Muslim populations in the region. The Balkan Muslims, especially in Serbia and Bosnia and Herzegovina, have a strong sentiment for Turkey. For them, for a number of historical reasons, Turkey means the same as Russia for the Serbs. On the ground, however, neither Russia invests in Serbia nor does Turkey invest in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Russian companies dominate the Serbian energy sector, and it is Russia rather than Serbia that benefits from this business. In spite of widespread beliefs about Turkish influence in Bosnia and Herzegovina, according to the official statistics, Turkey is the 11th biggest investor in the country. At the end of 2016, only 3% of all foreign investments were from Turkey. Still, some analysts believe that Turkey is seeking to present an alternative model for the Balkan EU candidate countries. In reality, Turkey is neither an alternative or even the biggest economic actor in the region. The Balkans does not even feature among the top issues in Turkish public opinion. For domestic reasons, Turkish politicians often exaggerate the role of their country in the Balkans. However, the region is not in primary focus of the Turkish foreign policy. Turkey is focused on the developments in Syria as well as its relations with the United States and Russia. In the Balkans, Ankara is far from being the major player. In spite of centuries of Ottoman rule in the Balkans, Turkish cultural influence in the region is relatively weak. People in the Balkan countries do not speak Turkish, and they are not rushing to learn the language. As a comparison, after centuries of the British rule in Ireland, a very small percentage of the population in the country speaks Irish as an everyday language. It could be argued that Great Britain was far more successful in spreading its culture than the dying days of the Ottoman Empire. With the exception of popular Turkish soap operas and the occasional interest in renovation of the Ottoman-era buildings, realistically, it is unlikely at the present moment of time for any neo-Ottoman Empire-type situation in the Balkans. For the foreseeable future, the region will keep gravitating to the West in economic, social, cultural, institutional, and political terms. That's all for today. Thanks for watching another KJ vid. We hope you enjoyed the video and would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please don't forget to join our YouTube membership plan or subscribe to kjvids.co.uk for full access to our content and more geopolitical analysis. Thanks for watching again, and see you next time.